The parish of St. Michael's had always been a peaceful place. Nestled in a quiet town, it was the kind of church where people came seeking silence, comfort, and refuge from the noise of the world. Its old stone walls echoed with generations of prayers, baptisms, weddings, and funerals. The faithful gathered each Sunday with a deep sense of routine. The Mass followed the rhythm they knew so well, the readings, the hymns, the prayers. Nothing unusual ever happened. That is, until one ordinary Sunday when a little boy suddenly pointed at the altar and said something that would shake the entire parish to its core. It was a bright morning, and families filled the pews. Among them was 6-year-old Daniel, a lively boy known for being curious and often restless during Massachusetts. He came with his mother, a single parent who was trying her best to raise him in the faith. She often worried that his playful nature would embarrass her in church, but she kept bringing him anyway, believing that one day something would touch his heart. That Sunday, as the priest raised the host during the consecration, Daniel suddenly sat upright, his eyes widening as if he had seen something extraordinary. He tugged at his mother's sleeve, whispering loudly enough that those nearby could hear. "Mommy, look, the man on the altar. He's shining." Startled, his mother hushed him, thinking he was just being imaginative. But Daniel was not finished. He stood up, pointed directly at the altar. In a voice clear enough to echo through the hushed church, he exclaimed, "Don't you see him? Jesus is standing right there." The congregation gasped. The priest froze in the middle of the Eucharistic prayer. For a moment, the only sound in the church was Daniel's little voice, filled with awe and innocence. People glanced at one another, unsure of what to think. Some assumed the boy was just imagining things, as children often do. Others felt an inexplicable shiver run down their spines. The priest, Father Augustine, continued the Mass, but his voice trembled slightly. When the service ended, parishioners gathered in small groups, whispering about what had just happened. Some brushed it off as childish fancy. Others wondered if perhaps God had chosen to reveal something to this little one. After all, didn't Jesus once say, "Let the little children come to me, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these"? Matthew 19, verse 14. Daniel, meanwhile, was restless. Why didn't anyone else see him? He asked his mother as they walked home. He was right there. He looked at me and smiled. His mother tried to calm him down, but deep inside, she was shaken. She could not forget the way his small voice pierced through the silence of the church with a conviction far too strong for a child to invent. Later that evening, Father Augustine sat alone in the rectory, replaying the event in his mind. As a priest, he had spent years preaching about the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. He knew it was true by faith, but hearing a child announce it so vividly made him realize how easily adults had grown numb to the miracle that occurred at every Mass. He opened his Bible and reflected on the words of Matthew 18, verse 3. "Unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." Perhaps God used this child to remind us, he whispered to himself, that the mysteries we celebrate are not symbols. They are real. Christ is here, in our midst, even if we cannot see him with our human eyes. Word had spread quickly through the parish and even beyond. The next Sunday, The church was packed with curious visitors who wanted to see the boy who claimed to see Jesus. Some came with faith, others with skepticism. Again, as the consecration began, all eyes subtly turned toward Daniel. He sat quietly at first, but then, just as the priest lifted the chalice, his face lit up again. He pointed, whispering this time, he's smiling again. Jesus is happy. A woman sitting near Daniel began to weep softly. A man who hadn't been to confession in years suddenly felt the urge to kneel and pray. Something unseen, yet deeply felt, seemed to sweep over the congregation. In the weeks that followed, the parish experienced a quiet revival. People began returning to confession in larger numbers. Attendance at daily Mass increased. A few who had long drifted away from the church found themselves drawn back. Daniel, on the other hand, did not always speak during Mass after that. Sometimes he sat quietly, as if simply resting in a peace that others couldn't see. When asked by his mother about those moments, he would say, "He doesn't always show himself, but I know he's there." The boy never sought attention. In fact, he became shy when people tried to question him. But the sincerity of his words had already done their work. Not everyone was convinced, of course. Some accused the parish of exaggerating a child's imagination. A few even mocked the story on social media. But for those who had been present that first Sunday, the memory remained too powerful to dismiss. They remembered the hush that fell over the church, the way the air seemed charged with something holy, and the unshakable conviction in the boy's voice. Even if it was just a child's imagination, one parishioner remarked, God used it to wake us up to his presence. And maybe that's the real miracle. The story of Daniel became less about whether he truly saw Jesus and more about what it stirred in the hearts of the faithful. His innocent proclamation forced adults to confront their own lack of awe for the Eucharist. Too many had grown accustomed to treating Mass as routine. Too many had forgotten the reality that Christ himself becomes present on the altar, body, blood, soul, and divinity. Through the words of a little boy, the parish was reminded that heaven touches earth at every Mass, and that faith sometimes requires the eyes of a child to truly see. The church has always believed that God occasionally grants visions or consolations to certain people, especially children, to remind the faithful of divine truths. From the apparitions at Fatima to the child visionaries of Lourdes, history is filled with moments when God chose the simple and innocent to confound the wise. Daniel's words echoed these traditions, not as a new revelation, but as a confirmation of what the church has always taught, that Christ is truly present at the altar. Years later, people still remember that day. Some call it the moment when their faith deepened. Others call it the spark of renewal. The boy himself grew older, but the parish never forgot the little voice that cried out during the consecration. Every time the bell rings and the host is lifted high, many in that church still hear his words in their hearts. Don't you see him? Jesus is standing right there. The story of Daniel teaches us something essential, that faith is not about waiting for extraordinary signs, but about recognizing the extraordinary reality that is already present. Every Mass is a miracle. Every altar is Calvary made present again. But sometimes God allows a child to remind us, because children have a purity of heart that sees what adults too easily overlook. And perhaps that is why Jesus himself said, Whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 18, verse 4. If this story touched you, let it remind you never to approach the altar casually. Christ is there, whether we see him or not. And through the innocent words of child, he calls us back to wonder, reverence, and faith. If you believe more people should hear stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful Catholic stories that inspire faith and renew hearts.